Right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. We've got quite a number of people on the webinar this morning, so I'm just going to give it a minute or two to make sure we've got time to get everyone in and see people joining at the minute. It's really good to see. That's brilliant. It's filling up quite nicely. Right, just going to give it a few more seconds. Right, brilliant. I think that's pretty much there. Right, I think we're all good to go. So welcome and thank you for joining us this morning for the Building Better Business Resilience webinar, hosted by Hayward Wright and supported by Bold IT and Brewers Resilience. We've got a wide range of businesses in the room. Some names here I recognise and others I don't, which is fantastic. Just a quick housekeeping point. We've got some time set aside at the end of the session for Q&A. So if you've got a question for the guys, please do add it to the Q&A box. You can access this from a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click on that, drop your questions in there, and I'll try and deal with as many of them as I possibly can. Right, let's kick this thing off. So this is one of a series of webinars and seminars that we at Hayward Wright are running, covering all kinds of topics to help and educate business owners. You will see emails about future events in due course. Please do feel free to share these. For those of us who haven't met, I'm Alistair Hayward Wright, MD at Hayward Wright, a full service accountancy, tax and advisory firm who help SME owners to really understand their numbers and use them to achieve their business and personal goals. I'm really pleased to have two great friends of Hayward Wright with us today. First up will be Rory Bewers from Brewers Resilience, and then Sean Barnes from Bold IT. Rory, if I could ask you to do a quick introduction, then get Sean to do a quick introduction before we flip back to you, Rory, for you to kick off your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rory Bewers. I started working in resilience while I was in the military, looking at medical supply chain and medical operations. From there, I left and joined the NHS, working in business continuity as a lead for Worcestershire Acute Hospitals Trust. And a few veteran friends of mine that started their own businesses were asking me about business continuity and what it meant and how they could apply it to themselves. So I started my own consultancy company, which I run alongside my work within the NHS. And I'm very excited to be here today to be talking to you all.
Brilliant. Cheers, Rory. And Sean?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Sean Barnes and I am an IT business manager. I've worked in the technology sector for just over 20 years, and resilience has always been a topic that clients ask a lot of questions about. I work for Bold IT, who are a Midlands-based managed IT service provider, who've been helping clients with IT support and technology solutions for over 30 years now. I really appreciate being asked to discuss the business resilience from an IT and technology point of view with you this morning. And so thanks to Alistair and Alex from Hayward Wright for inviting me to present today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Cheers, Sean. Over to you then, Rory. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, morning, everybody. So I'm going to be talking to you all about business continuity today, what it is, what it means, how you can apply it to your business, and we'll do a bit of myth busting as well. I always like to start these exercises by sort of hammering home the point as to why it's important. So if you take yourself back 3 hours ago, it's 4 minutes past 6, and your alarm's just gone off and you're dozily getting yourself out of bed, and you've woken up to find that there's a national power cut. So the entire nation has gone down for power. That my laptop's charged. I can use the hotspot on my phone to do this webinar, as to not upset Alistair and the rest of his team, because we've been looking forward to this for a little while now. And I can use those until the battery backup on my local phone mast drops out in about an hour or two's time. From there, it's a waiting game really until my laptop and my phone run out of power. Luckily, I'm working from home today, if you couldn't tell, so I don't have to travel anywhere. But my car has got fuel in it. I don't know if anybody on this call drives a Tesla, but you're probably going to be in for a rough day. And if you do need to put petrol or diesel in your car, how do you intend to pay for it? Do you regularly keep cash around the house? Will the petrol station that you intend to go to even be open? Can they get the shutters up? And if they do get the shutters up, can they open their till? Is that run by power? And even then, can the fuel come out the ground? Because that's pumped using electricity as well. As is the water that's making its way to your home. So once any local water tanks run dry, you better hope you've got some bottled water kicking about, or you live near preferably a stream and not a canal. The food in your fridge has got maybe 12 hours, but your freezer's going to start defrosting pretty quickly. Do you have an electric oven? If not, do you have a barbecue outside or a fire pit? We're going to go back to the Stone Age and do some old school cooking. What about loved ones and family members? Are they at school? Are they at work? Are they safe? Do you need to go and collect them? And how do you intend to do it? Once you've contended with all of those problems, you then have to think about going to work, which is probably the key point there. You've got to figure all of that out before you even attend work, let alone worry about your business. So let's then think about how damaging that would be to your operations without power. If you're a remote working mortgage advisor, for example, it's not great, it's not ideal, but it's not going to be the end of the world. But if you're a factory owner or a care home manager, or you run a college or a school, it's going to be pretty devastating to your operations. And even then, if you can open, are your staff going to arrive? Because they haven't got food in the fridge, their kids can't go to school, they haven't got any petrol in their car. So how are you going to manage that staffing shortage? So that's a scenario that I was put through last year by National Grid. They were looking at how they were going to handle a cyber attack to their operations. And a cyber attack does have the potential to knock power off to the entire country. And that's something that I'm sure we'll be talking about in much greater detail later on. Now I've scared you all to death, let's talk about business continuity. So business continuity refers to the process and procedures an organisation puts in place to ensure that it can continue during and after disruptions. That's a very simplified definition of business continuity, but it does outline the purpose quite simply. Now, your organisation may have in-depth business continuity plans in place already. You may already conduct a good level of business continuity within your organisation, not be aware of it. If you want to find out if you do, talk to your cleaners or your very lower level staff. They will be the ones that are well aware if you've got anything in place and what to do when disaster strikes, because normally they're the first ones in the morning that have to figure it out. You may not have anything in place whatsoever. Business continuity is much more about prevention than it is about continuation. I like to think of it almost as a mindset that managers and organisations need to adopt. It's common to hear people say things like, well, we were fine during COVID, we've never had any problems before. It seems a lot of faff for something that may or may not happen, but it's a really important step in protecting your business. Next slide, please. So why is business continuity important? I apologise if you can't read the writing on my slides, but we'll go through them anyway. I'm a big fan of a statistic. They quite elegantly frame my point. So 89% of organisations cease trading within 12 months of a business continuity incident that lasts 5 days or more. There's a lot of caveats in that sentence, so I'll break it down. When you consider that the beast from the east closed some roads for 10 to 15 days and the snow was around for a lot longer than that, it's not unfeasible to see a 5-day disruption on the horizon this year. Then consider that you're going to lose a large proportion of those businesses that have suffered that disruption. 51% of businesses have no formal business continuity plan in place. The flip side of that is that half of businesses do have that plan in place. Looking at the previous statistic of 5-day disruptions terminating the majority of businesses, it's then a fair assumption, in my opinion, to take that of that 49% that do have business continuity in place, that it isn't adequate planning. It's not a good enough business continuity system to keep that business open and running. A lot of businesses think they fall into one of two camps. They're either too small to require business continuity, or they're large enough to have lulled themselves into a false sense of security. Thinking about earlier that common sentence I always hear of, we were fine during COVID. So that's something to consider. Final statistic is that 75% of businesses have suffered a supply chain disruption in the last 12 months. Now, that isn't a utility failure, that's not a staffing shortage, that's not a loss of infrastructure, that's purely a supply chain issue. In addition to these statistics, 33% of businesses surveyed stated that they had lost customers or clients following a disruption to their service. So not only do you have to contend with recovery, but you're going to be recovering with less clients, statistically, that is. The longest phase in any BC incident is the recovery, and as I say, that's what takes the time, and that's where if you've lost your customers and your cash flow, you're really gonna struggle to get that business continuity back on track. Next slide, please. So, when are we likely to encounter these disruptions? I went onto BBC News and I took a screen grab of one day's worth of news, and put this little slide together. So we've got hundreds affected by power cuts regionally, that's in Cambridgeshire. Heavy rain and floods prompt severe weather warnings, that was across the nation. We live in Worcestershire. I've never lived anywhere that's underwater as much, and I used to live in Devon. It's devastating how much this place is underwater, but there you go. Schools and care homes without water after a mains burst, that isn't just going to affect the schools and the care homes, that's going to affect the families of those people. So think about your staff, they're going to have to go and look after elderly relatives. Children, can they work from home? Can they work remotely? Can they work flexible hours? M&S website app hit by a technical issue. That's going to mainly affect Marks and Spencer's, clearly. But I, as a customer, if I want to send my wife some flowers, for example, I regularly use M&S for that. And if I went onto the M&S website and I couldn't, I'd go somewhere else, plain and simply. I wouldn't wait about for them to resolve the issue. So that's a very nicely framed how customers would think. And a pub evacuated as caravans catch fire, that's down in Cornwall. In rural communities, we have some of them in Worcestershire, certainly from where I'm from in Northamptonshire and in the southwest. Pubs are the absolute hub of the community. I was regularly being sent to the pub to borrow eggs and a cup of milk and various other bits and bobs. If a pub closes down, that really could be the hub of the village in tatters. And again, that could impact people such as staff. Next slide, please. So what will good business continuity do for your organisation? I've broken these down into sort of 4 key areas. Legal compliance. So if you are a supplier or contractor to a Civil Contingencies Act responder, and I as much as it pains me, I've only got 10 minutes, I could talk about the Civil Contingencies Act all day. But if you are a supplier to police, fire, ambulance, one of those utility companies, you have a responsibility to the general public and the populace at large. That therefore means that you need to make sure that you have business continuity in place, because it's part of the contracting system to get those contracts. You tick a box to say that, yes, we have business continuity in place and we understand our responsibilities. It may not be that you are a direct supplier to one of those. This weekend alone, there's been an E. coli outbreak in the southwest. In the southwest, they make all of the sandwiches for the majority of hospitals, prisons, military bases, other very large institutions, colleges. They've had a food health alert because they've had to recall all of it because some of their staff have had E. coli. So up and down the country, there were prisons and hospitals without any food to provide to their people. So that's something that's happened this weekend. And it's fallen out from that there was no business continuity plan in place for that subcontracted business. So that's part of your legal compliance. On this call, we've got a raft of different industries. There may well be something within your industry that requires legal compliance from a business continuity perspective. It's really easy to get caught out on, so just something to consider. Trust and confidence, as I said with the M&S app, if you can keep trading through disruptions when your competitors can't, you're definitely going to see a bump in new sales and new clients. Remember that statistic that 33% of businesses lose clients to customers following disruption. I know for a fact I'd rather drive a car that starts every time than one that doesn't. I'd much rather use businesses that are ready to go at all times than those that aren't. Protection of operations, this is much more internal. If you can limit impacts to protect your staff, protect your services, you're going to protect your production rate, whatever it may be. If you're a self-employed consultant or a freelancer, you're going to be looking at your workload. If you're a college or a school, you're going to be looking at safeguarding responsibilities. Again, I could go on all day, but I've only got 10 minutes. The incentive that, if we're honest, is the key reason that anybody does business continuity is financial. That acquisition of new clients and protecting services, protecting supply chains, building of trust. You're going to be adding strings to the bow of financial security. So that's something to consider. Something that isn't always considered is other financial incentives, such as lower insurance premiums. There was a survey done of the British Insurers Association, I believe it was, and they quite unanimously stated that if a business can display a good level of business continuity planning, they would happily offer them lower premiums. That's not something that's always asked for when you have your insurance meetings with your brokers, but it's something to mention next time we consider if you have this in place. Business interruption claims have dramatically increased in recent years, so those policies are getting gradually more expensive in line with that. So that is something to consider. Next slide, please. So I've been talking about business continuity plans and business continuity planning, but what is it? How do we do it? So you need to consider how you want to manage business continuity within your organization. And that entirely depends on the size of your organization. You might be a one-person operation, you might be a small business of 20 to 50 people, you might be a massive organization or part of a large organization of hundreds or more. Business continuity is, I see it as a management responsibility, certainly for the protection of your staff and your services. It's a very good management tool to use, certainly in larger organizations, to make sure that your area or department can run nice and smoothly. If you're a business owner manager, it is 100% in your interest to make sure this is something that you are doing regularly and routinely. So once you've considered how you want to manage it, do you want to look at it quarterly? Do you want to look at it annually? When are you going to write and review that plan? Whose responsibility is it within your organization? You type that out on a sheet of A4 paper. It doesn't need to be War and Peace, just a few paragraphs of how you want to govern that within your organization. There's loads of tools online that you can use in templates, things like Copilot and ChatGPT. If you type in what do I need to consider for a business continuity management system, it will tell you what that is. There's so much jargon within the industry. It's so easy to get confused and get sort of caught up in it. Once you've got that in place and you've decided how you want to manage it, you need to look at your 7 Ps. So these are people, so your staff, your customers, your clients. How can you protect them? What specialities of staff do you need? What's the minimum staffing number that you require? If it snows, who are you going to send a 4x4 to pick up because you absolutely need them on site? So that's your people. Process. So technology, business strategies, production line, whatever processes you have, what is the process that is the most important? What are your key services that you provide that you need to protect at all costs? The classic example that's given is if you're a baker, do you produce the cakes that you sell to the general public, or do you provide the bread to the hotel down the road that pays twice as much? So which is the essential service that you would want to keep up? The customers that pop in every other day will pop in another day when you're open and available. That hotel will go and find somebody else to provide that bread. So that's an example there. Premises. This is your physical locations. This is your buildings. Can you work from somewhere else? If you're a remote worker or you are a hybrid worker, can you send people to work from home? If you're a factory, is there a sister warehouse that you could utilize? Is there other companies that you could ask to subcontract work? That sort of thing for premises. You think about your physical buildings. You also might have a responsibility to, for example, if you're a care home, I know I keep using that as an example, but it's quite a good one. You might have tenants, you might sublet certain areas of your offices. So do you have a responsibility to those people? Providers, these are your suppliers, not just for your critical operations and your supply chain. We're also thinking about your utilities, that sort of sketch. Program, we've discussed that already. That's your business continuity management. Perception, I know I keep waxing lyrical about it, but how people perceive you is exceptionally important, and getting that PR out there, getting that communications out there to say, look, we are affected by whatever the disruption may be. Please bear with us. This is the change of process. I think a lot of people got quite good at that during COVID, and it's something that people have sort of started to lapse on recently. Once you understand your key services, your key products, and you've gone through your 7 Ps, you need to look at implementing mitigations. There's a list of them on the right-hand side there. They can be things like hardware that Sean will talk about soon, 4G routers, backup power generators, hard copies of key documents, whatever it may be. They're about as varied as the industries that we've got on the call, so I'm not gonna hammer that home too much. And once you've got all of that, you need to put that into a document. If you've got some set triggers of this is when we will act, this is how we will act, a list of the resources that we will use, and the mitigations that you've got in place. You can have the best plan imaginable even, but if you don't deliver staff training on that plan and make sure that everybody's aware of it, very quickly you're going to fall into trouble. With all of my plans, I like to include a plan on a page, and that's something that is becoming sort of industry standard now. So it's a very simple list of, if this happens, this is the first step. And that is spread about. All staff have a copy of it. All staff are aware of it. It's printed off, it's laminated, it's in physical locations, it's put on posters. People have access to that. And that simplifies the 50-page plan that you can write, so that everyone's aware of it. And then the key thing that you need to do around that is deliver staff training to make sure that all staff are aware of how to act, because that will limit the effects of incidents, because you'll start the process early. You can get to the recovery phase quicker, which, as I've said, is the longest and probably trickiest phase of any incident. Once you've got that in place, you're going to review that plan annually, quarterly, however it is that you choose to do it under your management system. You can use Check, Do, Act, OODA Loop, whatever management review tool you've seen on LinkedIn that week. That's the hot thing. That's how you just go through it, review it, make sure that you update it as and when required. That's almost all from me. But before I disappear, I've got a few sort of key hints and tips. Next slide, please. Firstly, if you can involve all of your staff in business continuity, the process of writing, updating, and implementing that plan, you'll start to ingrain it into your culture as an organisation. That's the best way, in my experience, to make sure that these incidents don't have too much of an effect, because everyone's aware of it and everybody knows how to act. You can raise awareness with a small exercise. Sit with a coffee on a morning and say, I don't know if you've seen the news today, but this has happened. How would we cope with that within our organisation? And that's a really good way of getting staff involved and getting people through the door and talking about it. Deliver training. I can't make that point clear enough. I've done some training for people previously, and they've come back for more and asked for more training sessions because they saw the benefit in it. Little exercises, like the one I did at the start, just talk through that, and that will really get people thinking about it. Make it work for you. Business continuity is quite a big topic. You can have a single plan, you can have a system of plans, you can have standard operating procedures, you can include it in your weekly or monthly meetings, just discussing it. However you see fit to put business continuity within your organisation is how you should implement it. And finally, as a veteran, I love a bit of terminology, and there is so much jargon within business continuity, it's outrageous. So don't be put off by it. It's a lot simpler than it's made out online. So I can't implore you enough to just look at it, consider how you would implement it within your organisation, and start with those coffee conversations of how would we deal with XYZ. Thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Alistair.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rory. Really, really appreciate that. I met Rory through it was through a veterans event, actually, and some of his military stories are fantastic. And what I really like is we've obviously spent some time together talking about this kind of stuff. And it's that don't be put off by the jargon, because you really can cut through the jargon with this stuff. And Rory's been a brilliant support of that. Without further ado, I am going to pass over to Sean for him to talk about IT and IT resilience.
Thank you. Thanks, Alistair. And thanks, Rory, for the insights as well. I thought that was really useful, actually, a lot in there that I'd never thought of before myself. So, yeah, thank you for that, Rory. So, from an IT perspective, I've broken this down into 3 areas of the presentation to discuss. Firstly, infrastructure resilience and disaster recovery. It's a really important one, obviously. Secondly, cybersecurity. It would be remiss of somebody in the IT sector not to discuss cybersecurity during a presentation on a topic such as resilience. And also I'll run through some best practices that all businesses should be adhering to. Next slide, please. The main principles with infrastructure resiliency is what should happen in the event of hardware failure. Of course, things do break and go wrong from time to time. Servers, for example, are made up of a number of moving parts. The disk within a server are spinning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there is a high probability that a drive will fail during the server's lifespan, which is why a server should be built with resiliency as standard. This is the function known as RAID, or RAID, in the IT industry. We love an acronym. And this one stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. A server can be built in several different ways depending on its purpose. With RAID, you are able to specify a number of physical disks to be used as spares. These are drives that are replicating active disks and will come to life in the event of a disk failure, which allows time for the IT team to either replace the faulty disk with little to no downtime at all. UPS or uninterruptible power supply should also be used for the critical and on-premise equipment such as servers, firewalls, switches. So if there is a power cut, which what Rory was talking about earlier, this does allow time for either the power to resume or the server to be shut down properly to protect the data within it. Backups is an obvious one, but it still surprises me just how many people do not have adequate backups. If you have information stored or systems set up in a way which is business critical, then it must be properly backed up. It must be offsite and have the ability to be restored in a timely manner. If it isn't or you're unsure, then please find out from your IT team, A, what your recovery plan is, and B, how long it would take to be operational again. High availability, this is essentially the way to reduce downtime. The simplest plan is to have just at least 2 of everything. Critical appliances such as servers, firewalls, do have a high availability mode where they can route traffic, services, and applications to another appliance waiting either as a spare or in a load balancing setup. And in the event of failure, it can be switched to that appliance to continue to function until it's replaced. However, that's not really cost effective to most small to medium businesses. This is where the question of on-premise or cloud comes in. Both have advantages and disadvantages, so it really does come down to the type of application and the cost implications. With on-prem, you need to consider the solutions in the event of hardware failure. And if you do decide to move your systems to a cloud-based environment, then your internet connection becomes vital. A backup internet connection via a separate carrier is essential to ensure you remain operational. Next slide, please. So on to the next section, which is cyber security resilience. It's a huge topic in any IT department, either internal or outsourced over the past few decades or so. There has been cyber security resilience. Questions from what is it? Am I impacted? And what on earth should I do about it? It used to be thought that only big companies are impacted or targeted by cyber hackers, and that UK companies or businesses with under 50 employees were too small. But in fact, it is the opposite. Most hackers can't breach the big businesses. They have got excellent business resiliency and a lot of the best practices already in place. In fact, it is the smaller businesses that are targeted by the cyber criminals because they tend to be easier to exploit due to the ease of obtaining information on the stakeholders online. It is so easy to find out who the directors are and who's in the finance team. Then to access the email of both and learn how they communicate, what type of language they use with each other, just takes no time at all. I run through this in sections, starting with how we're impacting the UK, some real life examples of cybercrime, and I'll finish running through some best practices and I'll touch upon what EDR is and why it's important at the end. Can you just move the slide along, please? A troubling stat is that in the UK, we are more likely per head to be targeted by a cyber attack. I'm not entirely sure the reason for this stat, but maybe it's because we're an early adopter of technology, whether we're too trusting when it comes to our personal data online, or whether we're just a bigger target globally because of our international position. I suspect it's because we don't follow the proper training courses that are available to us. Like Rory mentioned earlier, training is so critical, as 95% of those attacks are breached directly through users or employees themselves. Next slide, please. So I've got a couple of examples of cybercrime. One you may have heard of and one you probably won't have heard of. Could you just move the slide along, please? Firstly, one of the most largest known, I say successful cyber scams, because they got the current foul for it, has been the one that's been admitted to is by the FACC. So they're an Austrian airline component business who supply all the major aviation companies such as Boeing and Airbus, for example. They were hit by an impersonation attack, which is one of the most common forms of cyber attack. In short, with a bit of research into who the key players were at FACC, a simple email hack got the bad actors all they needed for the breach attempts. There was a pending acquisition on the horizon as well, and some real data such as annual profits were known. This was the start of a small series of emails between the CEO, the CFO, and a couple of finance members. The hacker then had the CFO transfer 50 million euros, which is around 10% of the annual revenue, to the hacker's account for an acquisition opportunity. Needless to say, it cost the CEO of 17 years his job, as well as others involved, and it goes down as one of the biggest scams ever admitted to. Of course, there will be a substantial amount of scams that you never hear about, as the businesses involved never want to tell you about them because of the reputational damage that you can cause. And that is the main problem. We never hear about the majority of cybercrime as they're not reported. The news will cover big stories when they happen, but they're happening all the time. Can you just move the slide along, please? The next one, it's a story that you would not have heard about because it happened to a client of ours. It was just before they came on board with us, so not whilst we were supporting them. And they are a business in the legal sector who hired a new purchasing manager. In the first week, they were out purchasing some supplies on behalf of the directors when they received a WhatsApp message from the MD. The MD asked the purchasing manager to buy some gift cards for this month's employee rewards. And being new, they didn't yet know the company etiquette. And because the instruction came from a director, they promptly bought the gift cards, scratched off the 4-bar, sent the photos of the gift cards back to the MD as requested, ready for the presentations to happen. Later, when discussing with the director if he received the information, they both soon realised that they had been contacted by a hacker. The MD said that he had no idea what they were talking about. He looked at the message on their phone and said, "This must be a scam. I think you've been tricked by an imposter." The response from the purchasing manager was, "Oh no, not again." Turns out it wasn't the first scam they'd fallen victim to, but this one cost them well over £1,000. So, and that's another really common one that comes in via WhatsApp. On to the next slide, please. Just a few tips like finish for me on the last slide. I thought we'd leave with some tips, tricks, and some best practices. Some basic ones to start, really, which is check your emails carefully, beware of the links and attachments from external sources, enable the feature on your mail platform, which can flag when an email is sent from external sender to give that prompt. If you are out of the office, and using the internet, use a VPN where possible to protect your data. A virtual private network is like an encrypted tunnel when you're using the internet. Also, use hard to crack passwords, like 3 random words put together. You look outside, see 3 different random things, use that as your password. It's a good tip because they're really difficult to hack. And avoid using generic password and stay away from easy ones like password 123, let me in, QWERTY1, etc., etc. Always keep apps and software patched to the latest security release. These patches contain remediations to security threats as well as important updates. And stay vigilant online, generally on the internet and particularly on social media. There's a lot of cyber criminals hiding behind fake profiles, and there's also a lot of misinformation out there online as well to look out for. Can you just move the slide along, please? Endpoint detection response, or EDR. It's probably a webinar all in itself. It's such a big topic. In short, it's a product that uses good AI to combat bad AI. There's a lot of bad AI being used by cyber criminals at the moment for like phishing emails and also to try and you've probably all seen the deep fakes that are out there. EDR is able to learn threats as they happen and is also able to actively monitor viruses even once they're in your network, unlike traditional antivirus, which once it's in, can't do anything about it. It's the next must-have tool, really. And if you're applying for cyber insurance in the future, it will certainly be a question that they ask. Backups again, obviously, ensuring your critical data to your business is backed up and on a separate and in a separate location. And also, please enable multi-factor or authentication or two-factor authentication. They are the same thing where it comes to you use a second device to confirm your identity, and this be in the form of a mobile notification or an email to confirm it's you that's really logging in. They're just known by two different acronyms. And finally, if you get an email saying you won a competition that you haven't entered, then it's a scam. If it sounds too good to be true, then it most likely is. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Cheers, Sean. And yeah, I'll echo that point. If it sounds too good to be true, it certainly is. A thank you to Rory and to Sean for those insightful presentations. Really, really appreciate that. I think from this point we're going to open it up to questions a little bit, and I've got quite a number of questions, so I'll pick through. Louise, let me pick up on this straight away. We're actually recording the webinar as well, so a copy of the webinar will be available on the Hayward Wright website in due course, and yeah, we'll happy to circulate the slides post event as well, so we'll get those over to you as well. I want to jump in and pick up on something, because there was a theme through both of your presentations around staff training and training in general and being massively important. I echo that. I mean, we spend a lot of time with our staff ensuring we've got ongoing training programs, particularly around cybersecurity. What sort of stuff's out there? What sort of stuff's, if there was, what's the starting point for someone who thinks, actually, I've got a business, I've got a couple of members of staff. Is there some kind of starting point for that training? I suppose, Sean, if I could ask you around, I suppose, the availability of cybersecurity training and that sort of stuff, and to give that foundation to a member of the team.
Yeah, so cyber training is probably the biggest major one, really, because cybercrime is probably the majority of all crime out there at the moment, and the way that they tend to be able to breach people's network, because things like firewalls and actual appliance security is so good now, the weakest link is actually the employee. I think 95% of all cybercrime is actually gone through the employee. So actually the user training is really important there. And it used to be a case where, you get everyone in a room once a year, you'd scare the bejesus out of them, and everyone would be like really vigilant for the first couple of days. And then over the time of weeks, months, and then into the years, it's forgotten about, and actually the old habits are sort of like come back again. So good, effective training actually is little and often. There are some videos out there where you can get, and they're like 2-3 minute videos, which you can watch like once a week, once a fortnight sort of thing. And that little and often reminder is actually a lot more effective, I found, in training staff. And there are a lot of packages available. And after you get these sort of short videos, you get to answer 3 or 4 questions at the end, just to make sure that you're paying attention, and then you then get a score off the back of those questions that you answer and the videos that you watch. And then that gives you then an employee score, so you know who's doing well within the business, and you know where you can target particular additional training to if necessary. You also get a score as a business, which you can use when you apply for and get things like cyber insurance or business continuity insurance, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's good training out there, I think, really.
Brilliant, cheers, Sean. Rory, kind of, is there anything out there for that, the continuity planning, or is it more around kind of developing a plan and then instilling that across your team?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, really. So you've got the base level, as it is currently, is something called the CBCI, which is the Certificate of Business Continuity from the Business Continuity Institute. The problem with that is it's quite inaccessible for a lot of businesses, because it's a 2 or 3 day course and it costs over £1,000, which is a big commitment for something that you may not necessarily need as a high level skill for a member of your staff. There are business continuity e-learning packages that you can do online, but I mean, we've all done fire training online. How much prevalence does it actually take for people to listen to be completely honest? And there's 1,000,001 YouTube videos explaining it and other such, but there isn't really a formalized ground level training package. There's people like myself that will come into organizations and run small training days for staff, which, I mean, if I didn't see the value in it, I wouldn't be doing it day to day. But I think that the ground level for training staff and getting people aware of it is for a manager to write that plan and then to sit down and discuss it with staff. And it needs to be less of a PowerPoint based training session, more of an open discussion. And as I said in my presentation, sitting and having a coffee and saying, "Oh, you've seen the news? You know, we're expecting a heat wave." Out of interest, how would we handle it if our school reached a temperature that was too uncomfortable for students? If our factory was too hot, how would we handle X, Y, Z? And a lot of the time, someone would go, "Well, 2 summers ago we did this," and that's how you sort of A, build your plan, but B, how you sort of indoctrinate those new members of staff and people that may not have experienced those things in such instance.
Brilliant, thank you. And I love that. It's because as a management team, you think you can cover all of these things, but actually once you start engaging the whole team, some kind of ideas that come out that you think, actually we never thought of that. So it's pulling that whole team in is fantastic. That kind of really nicely leads me into Simon's question, which was, and I'm going to put a slight spin on this. His question is around what are the first steps in developing a business continuity plan? And if I could kind of suggest, you talked about it, Rory, that some businesses think they're too small to have to worry about this. So if you've got a typical small business, what gets them on the pathway?
So the official answer with lots of jargon is they need to conduct a business impact analysis. But actually what that is sitting down with a pen and paper and thinking, what are the 5 things that would absolutely ruin my business if they happen today? What would finish me off? And then how can I mitigate against those? So if you figure out your critical services and your key risks, they're 2 sides of the same coin, because how do those key risks affect those critical services? So very simply, just looking at your 7 Ps and thinking about your premises, your people, your procedures, your policies, and all that sort of stuff, and then just considering how those being affected would affect your key services, your key cash flow within your business, because that's why we're all here. We're here to make money and pay our mortgage. So what's going to stop me from being able to do that? And how do I do that best? And if you've got that figured out, you've got 2/3 of your business continuity plan already written. You've just got to put it on a sheet of A4 paper and tell everyone else that you work with what those are. And that's it in a nutshell, really.
Brilliant, love that, and I loved your comment about a plan on a page. Love that. And Sean, if I can come to you with kind of the same question, really, but obviously with the IT side of it, and let's face it, IT is critical to the vast majority of our businesses. So again, what are those first? If someone's sat there thinking, right, I'm really concerned now, I don't feel as though I've got any plans in place, or I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I had an IT failure. What are the quick wins and the first steps for those guys?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I suppose the most important thing, like we always said, is to have a plan to start with. To think about these things, and it really depends on where your critical information is. So if your critical information is hosted locally on a server, and all the things we talked about today, like power cuts and all the rest of it, needs to be considered. But where's your data backed up? But it's not just a case of having a backup in place when you might lose data. It's how quickly you can get that data. Like if that data is stored on a tape drive somewhere like it was 15 years ago, it takes 6 hours to get your data back, or 2 weeks to get your data back. But it's not really fit for purpose. So there's certain backup plans now where you can have multiple copies of it. You might have a second copy on site. You might have a third copy in the cloud. It's about what happens to the initial data and where to actually restore the data from. And a lot of people think if it's a cloud-based application, it's automatically backed up, which is sometimes the case, but not a hard and fast rule. It's worth just checking if you do have sort of services in the cloud, that there is also resiliency there. It may just be a case of where it's in a data center somewhere, but it's only got one replication of it. If it's critical to your business to be operational, and if without it you can't trade, you absolutely need to have a second copy of it somewhere and to be able to get that restored quickly. So that's more with the data, but also the operational side as well. So your actual physical appliances, such as your firewalls, your routers, and your switches, which actually, when you're in the office, make your staff being able to work and connect. It's having a plan for if the hardware fails. mean, you might have a switch, it might only be a couple of £100 switch, but if that breaks and everyone's down for the day until you replace it, which could take 24, 48 hours, it's no good. So for the sake of a couple of £100, get a hot spare and get it ready in place in case it does go wrong. So it's just that mindset really on hope for the hope, prepare for the worst, hope for the best sort of thing.
Brilliant, thank you, Sean. Right, what else are we going? Again, coming back to our teams, I suppose. Elizabeth, how do I introduce the idea of business continuity to my team? I suppose start with you, Rory.
It's normally the day after everything's gone wrong that people think about introducing these things to their teams. And it normally starts with a conversation. Something that we do a lot is debriefing, that I think is a really important stage. And again, there's templates available online coming out your ears, so feel free to have a look and find one that works for yourselves. But if you look at, and you can debrief something that happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago, last week, you can debrief an incident that didn't happen to you. But if you look at it and you sort of go through it and think, right, what worked well for these people, what didn't work well for them, what would we have done? You can only act with the information that you have at the time. So look at how you would go about improving that intelligence picture. How would I get more information to make a more informed and better decision were I in that position? And if you sat with your team and you're doing that as a debrief, whether that be a senior leadership team or a specific subject matter expert team within an organization, if you're looking at how you would manage incidents that weren't yours, again, your staff training, you're ingraining business continuity in what you're doing, you're talking about business continuity, and you're creating a plan, all from debriefing somebody else's incident. And that's what a lot of organizations, certainly emergency services, did after Manchester Arena, 7/7, 9/11. That's where the majority of our learning for major incidents come from. Certainly the beast from the east. I mean, any organisation could sit down and look at the beast from the east and think, how did that affect us day to day? Even this winter with the floods, or this coming summer, we're about to have the wettest August on record. So we're looking at summer flooding in Worcestershire, which is something that, I mean, rarely happens. Not flooding in Worcestershire, that is summer flooding specifically. But if you're ingraining that within your team, and again, it comes down to a conversation over coffee of let's consider our options. If we were put in this position, where would you be? And that ingrains it within your organisation, and it starts to write that plan. These plans write themselves when you really get into it and you remove all the jargon from it. They really do just write themselves.
Brilliant.
Just to
Cheers, Rory.
follow on from that as well, like from one of the points that Roy just said there, is it's similar with sort of like cybersecurity prevention. It's the easiest sale in the world straight after somebody's been hit by a cyber attack. But if you're speaking to somebody who's never actually experienced that before or has never gone through that before, then they don't always understand the necessary, whether it's for them or not. But when you talk to people about what they can do to prevent themselves, like in terms of antivirus devices, anti-spam, anti-malware, user training, dark web scanning, all that kind of stuff that's available to that's available to clients. But some people don't necessarily see the value of it before they're hit. After they're hit, they're on the phone to you straight away, throwing their money at you, saying, "Can you help us with this? Can you do this with?" And it's not too late at that point. But if they'd invested that slightly earlier and had a better plan for it, then it would have prevented the cyber attack in the first place, and everyone would have worked a lot more smoothly. So I think having that knowledge and understanding and having a plan for it before it arrives is probably the key takeaway here.
Yeah, I think
Prevention's better than cure piece, isn't it? That we both talked about. Snow shovels are a lot cheaper in August than they are in December. So it's prevention's better than cure. It really is.
It's true.
Absolutely. It's that whole investment bit, isn't it? It's about investing up front. And I think that's what we're keen to kind of for people to take away today is just have the conversations. It's not about scaring people. It's about just having the conversations and starting to do something and just move the dial a little bit. It's a personal story. We got a few years ago, we got broken into one night, and I'll tell you what, the following day when the locksmith came out to sort out locks and anything like that, I mean, it was an open door. He could sell me absolutely anything at that point, and you just think, oh no, if we'd actually considered proper security initially, it would have probably been a lot cheaper and a lot more peace of mind. So it's that up for planning, I think. I'm a little bit conscious of time. We've got loads of questions here and I don't want to rush through them. So anything that we don't get through, we'll, as I say, we'll come back via email. But Sean, can I? It's kind of a question for me more than anything actually at this point. It's about that whole internet connectivity resilience bit, because as I say, we're a nation that needs that instant gratification now. The thought of being offline, as it were, just socially and personally is terrifying. But obviously from a business point of view, as we move more of our resource online to the cloud, etc., that internet connection resilience is really important, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, with everything moving to the cloud, I mean, there's normally a cloud-based option for a lot of different applications now, or even appliances are going on online. So everyone thinks, oh, great, we'll move everything to the cloud. We don't need to host it ourselves. Don't need to, worry about the actual physical application. But what then is critical is the internet connection. And obviously, internet connections, they have a really good SLA, really good uptime in general. If you go for the more premium products like lease lines, but nothing ever has 100% uptime, and no one will ever give you 100% guarantee that it will work. So a really, really key thing to do if you do have a lot of applications online and they are business critical, is to have a second internet connection, obviously, which will work as a failover after the primary goes down. But there are a few different carriers in the UK that can physically dig up the ground and supply an internet connection. So it's really important, if you have a resilient internet connection, then don't have it with the same supplier. For example, if your primary is with BT, don't have your secondary with BT as well, because if BT are the problem, or they're the one that are having an issue in the local area, then both your circuits going to be down, and the backup's going to be a waste of time. It's always really key to go with a carrier or an MSP that has the ability to put multiple different carriers. One would use multiple different carriers. So, for example, if your primary is with BT, your secondary should be with Virgin, TalkTalk, or another, whoever that might be. So that's actually a really important thing to do as well.
Brilliant, cheers, Sean. Just want to come on to Neil's question about kind of responsibility, and is there what are the panelists' thoughts on who should take charge during a period of disruption? I suppose I'm going to ask each of you individually, actually, because I guess it may be slightly different answers. But Rory, kind of with experience, what's kind of worked well? Is there a type of role within a business that kind of naturally adapts to this kind of responsibility at a time of crisis, as it were?
I suppose it depends on your organisation size and structure. The simple answer, I would say, is the most appropriate person. So if whatever that outage may be, if it's a digital outage, to hand this nicely off to Sean, I would say that it would be your lead of IT or your lead of digital that would lead it. But you kind of need some strategic oversight from the rest of the organisation and probably the CEO or the senior manager, whoever that may be, to set priorities, to say, right, this is what we need back online first, second, third. This is our priority. Our key priority today is X, Y, Z. And then the subject matter expert, whoever that may be's responsibility is to make that happen. If you're a manufacturer, it would be the responsibility of your foreman to make sure that machines are back up and running, and liaise with engineers to get those machines whirring and turning and burning again. But it would be the responsibility of the senior manager to say, right, our priority is this list of orders, and that's what we need to get back online first. And in the absence of this piece of machinery, can we work on this list of orders on this machinery, for example? So I think to simply answer it, it would be the most appropriate person with the correct level of training within that organisation. However, the onus and the burden does come down on the senior manager, and I think they should be involved to set a strategic goal or a target, and that would be, in business continuity talk, that would be a recovery point objective that you're aiming for.
I think that comes back to what we talked about previously, isn't it? It's about having that plan, and actually it may be that different people should take the lead in different scenarios.
Yeah, for sure. And if you've done that training and everybody's aware of what needs to work, then everyone will on the turn of a dime, straight into it, and they know what they need to do and what the priorities already are. They're preset. You don't even need to get the manager out of bed So, you know, within a heartbeat, you've switched tact into your business continuity plan, and you're in that anticipation, making sure that we're keeping things continuing as best as possible.
Fantastic. And similarly, Sean, I suppose, is there an ideal situation for you? You know, if you're supporting a client that's maybe had an outage, had a cyber attack, is it useful to have that point of contact? And you know, very quickly, and I know it's quite a broad question, but are there a couple of key skills that maybe the lead on an IT related issue could have that would be really useful?
Yeah, I mean, we offer sort of unlimited on-site and remote support. So if it's something that, I mean, with IT services now, like 90% of things, maybe 99% of things can be sold remotely. So we have like remote control tools where we can jump onto users' machines or servers or appliances instantly over the web, and we can check the diagnostics, see what's wrong. We can usually get that resolved remotely pretty quickly without someone going to site. If we do need to go to site, then we will, and we get somebody to site, straight in the van, right site straight away. And if it needs something like rebooting or needs something like reconfiguring or fixing, then that can be done too. But there is normally, like Rory said, somebody on site who can do the basic checks and balances and things. So like if it is just a case of there's a red light on the router, let's try rebooting that first because the carrier's not showing an outage. We can get that done pretty quickly, and normally you can narrow down on the sort of like the troubleshooting and the diagnosis pretty quickly with a lot of the tools that we have access to now. So actually narrowing down what the problem is and who's responsible for that problem can happen, quicker than it's ever been able to, really. So there are, but it's again, who's responsible, and ultimately in a small business, you probably wear multiple different hats. When you first start in a business, you're business owner, you're team maker, you're sweeper upper, you just about everything. But then as a business grows, you start to spread out those roles and responsibilities to people who are hopefully more skilled in that area than you are, and that's obviously where that responsibility comes in. So yeah, I suppose it depends on what the issue is and find out quickly who the responsible party is.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Listen, I am really conscious of time. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm kind of going to wrap it up at that point. From my point of view, really pleased with how it's gone today. I'm going to have a massive thank you to our friends Rory and to Sean for taking the time to do this, and I hope everyone's found some use from today and maybe have some takeaways from today. I need to thank Alex, who's been working in the background, putting all this together for me, and the team, and our presenting slides and keeping us on track in the background. So thank you, Alex. We really appreciate that. And thank you to all of you guys for attending. As I say, I hope, even if you've taken one takeaway from today, and that helps you in your business, then I'm thrilled. As I said earlier, please keep an eye out. There'll be future events, in-person seminars, virtual webinars. We're looking to cover all kinds of different topics, just to kind of, help and educate business owners. And I apologise for the questions that I couldn't get through. I was trying to cherry pick ones that would kind of prompt discussion and stuff like that. Questions that we haven't got through, I'll make sure we get reached out to the individuals, and circulate and get answers for those. And as I said before, there'll be a recording of this online on our website in due course. That's everything. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.